Cory, Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm and Coach Don Patterson. We are here to talk about Iowa's 17-12 victory over Northwestern. Our call lines are open, 860-499-3332, 860-499-3332. I want to apologize to everybody who was waiting for the extra 6-7 minutes there, having some technical issues, but worked through them. Hopefully things are running smoothly. I've got a lot to unpack, as I'm sure you do as well, Don. We'll get to the quarterback situation. We'll get to the offense and play calling. But, Don, let's throw this to you first. Some quick takeaways from what was at least a win.
Yeah, the biggest disappointment I had is we weren't able to put them away. You know, that they hung around until the end of the game. And in that regard, they still had a slim chance to beat us late in the game. But on a more positive note, our defense was resilient. They finally gave up a touchdown late, but they also had 3 interceptions. I thought we were as sound as we normally are. A lot of players played well on defense. Offensively, we did a better job up front, and we had a few more places to run than normal. We needed those, of course. So I believe Tyler ended up with about 140 yards rushing. Let me see if I can check those numbers right quick.
That's exactly what CK16 says here, Don, that feels like we're learning to run the ball better again.
Yeah. Tyler had 21 carries for 141. I think the 141 was unofficial. He had 1 carry right there on that last possession. And I gave him credit for no gain on that play, that third down play. He came back in and ran the ball. So Padilla was 18 for 28 for 172, no picks. Even though they threw for 270, Cory, I would rather have Padilla's 172 without any interceptions versus Marty's 273 picks. So we had a lot of guys that played well on defense. A couple of names in particular. Joe Evans, I'm so proud of Joe because you're wasting your time if you try to run naked to his side of the field.
Yeah.
Or for that matter, run a reverse. You know, he's just a smart player, and he makes sure that he keeps the quarterback inside or the reverse man up inside of him. He will not be fooled. They were dumb enough to try to fool him more than once, and it hadn't worked yet. Padilla was, I thought, considering it was his first extended action, I thought he played with a lot of good poise. He seemed pretty decisive. He seemed to process pretty quickly about what to do with the ball, and he acted decisively when he decided what he was going to do. I thought one thing was interesting. Did you notice that the game plan seemed to involve the freshman receivers more than normal? But if you think about it, it actually makes some sense because Padilla is more used to throwing to those guys as backup players than he would be some of our usual starters that get more snaps than either one of the freshmen. So you could tell there was a comfort level that Padilla had with both freshmen. Both freshmen gave a really good account of themselves, as did Padilla. I couldn't help but notice at one point late in the game, it crossed my mind, Padilla reminds me a little bit of another number 8 from years and years ago. Now, maybe that's not fair to Padilla or the other guy, because the other guy was a 2-time All-Big Ten quarterback named Chuck Hartland. But he reminds me of Padilla and vice versa, if in part because of his size. You know, Chuck wasn't that tall either, but he played with a lot of intelligence and a lot of savvy, a lot of poise. He didn't seem to ever get flustered. And I think, considering that Padilla didn't have much playing experience, I have to give him good grades for how he performed. It's encouraging. And I don't know exactly what was tied into the decision. I think there's certainly a possibility it wasn't as simple as pulling Petrus because they simply lost patience with him. I think it might have tied into maybe he was a little bit beaten up from last week, and they decided after 3 possessions that he really couldn't perform. I think it's entirely possible that Petrus told him that on the sideline. I don't know what went into the decision right then and there, but it wouldn't surprise me if the decision was made in part because Petrus even acknowledged that he was not quite 100%, wasn't performing as well as he thought he might. It'll be interesting to see if the coaches comment on that here after the game. But that's just the impression I got from the way things played out. And Kirk had a comment at halftime that maybe suggested that that Petrus couldn't perform, and it was the way Kirk said it. I thought it might tie into a nagging injury from last weekend, something along those lines.
Don, is it possible that he said what he said to try to protect Petrus' psyche?
Yes, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. Just as you heard that Kelly Martin had a foot injury, and yet I read somewhere that he was still going to be involved with specialty teams, maybe. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that both of them are a little nicked up, maybe, and that might have been part of the decision making.
We do have a call here, Don. Before we get to our call, I want to address this question. Goodson not in on that last drive until third down. That was odd, wasn't it?
That was a mystery to me. I made a note. First off, I made a note that Gavin Williams, I thought, was solid in relief, ran hard, much like he thought he would. And then I had a question mark. Is he more secure? Are we saying he's more secure with the ball than Tyler? That would be a little bit odd if the coaches thought that were the case, simply because Gavin doesn't have that many game snaps.
Right.
But I will give him credit. It looked like he did have good ball security when he was in there, and he ran hard. And he was smart enough not to run out of bounds, things like that, when we were trying to burn clock there later in the game. So I think he would certainly deserve a passing grade for how he played tonight too.
Absolutely. Want to take a phone call here early. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, how you guys doing? This is Justice.
Hey, Justice. How are you?
Pretty good. I was just calling because I know in one of your previous shows you were talking about you wouldn't be happy if unless Iowa won by 20 or 30.
Correct.
I just wanted to, kind of see how you felt about, still getting a victory but not winning in the fashion that we all were hoping for.
Well, I love the fact that you're bringing this up, Justice, because my plan here was to let Don give his initial thoughts, and I have no problem sounding off about my thoughts. This was not impressive at all to me. I mean, that's just me. This was, to me, again, Alex coming in and playing was a nice development, and certainly he gave them the spark. But the second half was, a load of nothing. Obviously, Northwestern made some adjustments, I think, on Alex, but there were a lot of receiver drops. There were still issues with pass protection. The running game did get better. Play calling is still a complete. I have no idea what our play callers are thinking, and I'm obviously assuming that it's Brian Ferentz making these calls. So, yeah, I can get into that more later, caller, but no, you're absolutely right. I stand by that. I was not going to be happy unless Iowa decisively won this game. And the fact that Northwestern had a chance on the final drive to go win the game, I don't want to call it disgraceful, but it's sad. I'll say that it's sad.
Yeah, because it gives me zero confidence going into next week.
Yeah.
Because, we pulled out the win, but it's like, I don't get it. Like you just brought up just a second ago, why was Tyler Goodson not in on that one possession until the third down?
Caller, let me ask you a question, because I'm going to ask Don this question later, but why are we running the ball with 2 seconds left in the half from the opponent's 40-yard line?
Yeah.
No, I want an explanation. I want somebody to give me a logical explanation to this, because there is no logical explanation. There is no logical explanation to some of these play calls. And it wasn't just the play call. It was the time management that got Iowa to that point in the first place. So, again, I do want to talk to Don about this caller, but I didn't mean to sound off on you. But you kind of pinched a nerve there when you asked me that question.
No, I feel the same exact way. I guess I'm just wanting to rant a little bit or vent, because
sure.
I'm not satisfied with this win. I love the Hawkeyes, and I've been a fan of the Hawkeyes for as long as I've been alive, for 26 years.
Are you still with us? I think we lost him. Call back, caller, if we lost you. Looked like his signal went out. Don, while we're waiting for him to call back, since we're on the subject, can we address those final 2 minutes of the first half, Don? Because that was ridiculous, was it not?
It was. We had, I just got here in my notes, wasted 10 seconds before using the second timeout. The clock went from, I think, at least 10 seconds, maybe as much as 12 seconds. We took our second timeout with 34 seconds left. We could have easily called it 10 seconds earlier. So that was a really important wasted 10
seconds earlier.
Yeah, at least. We were just a little cloudy there with our decision making. We talked about Padilla being decisive. The truth of it is Padilla was more decisive than we were with what to do at the end of the half as a group of coaches. So that was disappointing. We should have at least had a chance maybe for a long-range field goal on that last possession. And at the time, I think the score, I know what it was 14-3 at the half. So even a field goal at the end of the half would have been good to make it a 2-score game. You know, we were up by 11. I realize that is a 2-score game, but let's face it, 17-3 is a lot different than 14-3.
Don, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do believe we got our caller back on the line. Justice, excuse me, are you with us?
Hey, yeah, I'm back.
Apologize for that. Was there any other questions you had for Don, or did you just want to rant a little bit?
Yeah, I was just gonna go off on a rant and vent a little bit if there was time to do that, because
sure.
To me, it just doesn't seem like, you know, Padilla came in and it was good to see that initial spark like we were talking about, but he didn't do anything that I don't think Petrus couldn't have done himself. Like, I wanted to see more of his legs get put to use other than, you know, him making the same passes that I feel Petrus could have made. He still threw it in the dirt. He still overthrew some of the receivers. You know, I don't know what he really did that would, you know, suggest that he's any better than Petrus.
Well, let's be real, caller. In Padilla's defense, Spencer had went almost the entire first quarter, and maybe he was hurt. I don't know, but he went the entire first quarter. The offense stalled out time and time and time again. He comes in there and leads them, I believe, 2 straight touchdown drives. Now, there were adjustments made in that second half, but again, in his defense, he came in, gave this offense a spark. There were a lot of drops. Tracy had a drop. Charlie Jones had a drop. Keegan Johnson had a drop or two. There were a lot of drops by these receivers on really good throws by Alex Padilla. Now, I'm not saying he's the permanent answer, but at this point, given some of the issues we've seen at quarterback, I don't think Alex did anything to lose his job tonight, and he did get the win.
Yeah, that's true. I just would have liked to see a better rotation of the quarterbacks, like utilize Padilla's, I guess, legs or ability to scramble, because we know Petrus can't. But Petrus is still, you know, shown throughout the year that he can make good passes.
Yeah, he did. You're right.
Like the line played better tonight, where he could have had a little bit better protection. But I don't know.
And maybe they will, caller, because Kirk, again, if it's true that Spencer is banged up, I have a hard time seeing them just eliminating him from the game plan. Maybe it is a situation where you can utilize both guys. I agree. I think that's the move to make once Spencer's healthy, and may the best guy win at that point.
That's true. Yeah.
So, anything else, caller?
I guess my last question would be, I mean, where do you see us going from here? I mean, Minnesota lost, but Wisconsin put it on Rutgers.
I mean, I don't see Wisconsin losing again, to be completely honest. I hate to burst Hawkeye fans' bubble. I mean, that may not be true. Maybe they will lose. I don't know if Iowa will win out, but I still don't think Wisconsin's going to lose, which means Wisconsin's probably going to win the West. But it's not a guarantee. If Iowa wins out, they've got a shot. So, Don, do you have anything to add to that as far as your outlook?
No, I agree. I think we should just be focused on ourselves. If we can be fortunate enough to go 7-2 in conference play, then if that only means that we're co-champs of the West, then that's still an awfully good season. And let's face it, the day we played Wisconsin, they were clearly the better team.
Well, I appreciate your guys' input. I'm going to continue watching the show.
Appreciate the call, Justice. Call us again. All right. We do have another caller here we want to get to. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Alex from Cedar Rapids.
This is not Alex Padilla, is it? I'm assuming this is a different Alex.
Yeah, no, different Alex, unfortunately. Okay. It'd be nice to be able to play on the field with him, but yeah, unfortunately.
What'd you think of your counterpart today?
So I watched the entire game, and I think it was the right choice. Spencer Petras, I think when he misses throws, he tends to overthrow, and he dirted probably 3 or 4 of them. So I think he still had some injuries from that Wisconsin game, and I think it was the right call. And you could, as we saw, that Iowa's offense looked a lot more crisp, at least in the first half. And I actually had a question, maybe the coach or maybe you can answer something that I actually noticed. This is the 3rd week that Iowa has won the toss, but they decided this week, out of the 3, they put their defense on the field. The last 2 weeks against Purdue and Wisconsin, they put their offense out on the field. Now, my question is your defense is obviously the better half of the football. Why not put them out there? You give yourself the best chance. They give yourself the better chance of setting the tempo, setting the mood, getting a stop, getting the ball back in great field position because you got a great return man in Charlie Jones. So I'm kind of curious of why we would put the offense out there first when everybody knows that it's not Iowa's strong suit.
Yeah, the wind was a factor. You're right about that. Cory, that's your doing there, I guess, the banner, right?
To me, that was clearly what it was, right? Coach, it was the wind.
Yeah, the wind was a definite factor to start the game. I don't know what it was blowing at officially, but at least probably 15 or 20, I guess.
At least. I mean, they showed the kick from Shudak in pregame that just completely died.
Yeah, the wind was significantly out of the south. I think that was a little bit of it. I think beyond that, you think back when we were playing Purdue, Purdue's offense, their defense is good, but let's face it, their offense has always given us trouble. It didn't surprise me that we would choose to take the ball first. What the caller may not realize is it was really important to get off to a fast start against both Purdue and Wisconsin in terms of scoring. And one way to do that, of course, is to have an extra possession, maybe even in the first half. Or certainly you got the first chance to score a touchdown if you take the ball to begin the game. And not to mention, as you know, Cory, second quarter scoring in general is the most critical quarter. That's been true in recent years in the Big Ten. And, of course, one way to win the second quarter is to have the wind at your back in the second quarter. I think today, though, Kirk simply saw it a good opportunity for us to get a stop early on. First quarter scoring was not such a reliable indicator of who wins when you looked at the Northwestern games this year. It was tied into other factors other than first quarter scoring was not that high on the list, as I recall. So it was more important to outrush them. We outrushed them 2-1. And as I recall, that was one of the leading indicators was who outrushed who. The team that outrushed the opponent, I think, won just about every time in all those Northwestern games, as I recall.
Yeah, and I would add to that, caller, that I think the wind played into that. Don is certainly stressing the confidence that Kirk has in the defense. And I just think, typically when you see Iowa take the ball to start the game, I mean, not that this offense has ever been great, but if there's any time where you probably want to go out with your strength, it's right now, given the last 2 games. That's just my theory. I could be wrong, but does that answer your question, caller?
Kind of. I just thought that your defense is a ball hawking defense. It forces turnovers. It's a great defense, probably top 5, maybe top 10 in the nation. I would say lead with your best foot. Put your best foot forward, which is your defense. Who knows? We saw against Penn State. Granted, I think Iowa got the ball first that game too, but when Penn State had the ball, we got an interception on the very first play. So yeah. I think the defense needs to start the game because they can kind of set the tempo of the game. If they get an early 3 and out, get your offense in good field position. And we saw with Alex Padilla and the last caller I was listening to, I would like to see them use his feet more. I'm not asking for like, where we run him like Adrian Martinez or Sean Clifford, but get him rolling out and have him, have the threats to run, because he actually didn't run it at all, or there was no design place for him to run, which I think was personally, I think it was just to keep him, healthy so he doesn't take some big hits. But still like to maybe see him use his feet a little more, or at least have the coaching staff use his feet a little more.
I totally agree with you, caller, and hopefully we see that. Again, I'd like to see a mix of Alex and Spencer, but if Spencer's not healthy, Alex should be the starter next question. You shouldn't. There's not, to me, at least from what we've seen, there's not wide enough a gap right now between those two guys to where I'd rather play a banged up Spencer over a healthy Alex who can run.
Yeah. And just a few more things. I actually wrote notes during the entire game. And so obviously with Padilla coming in, there was an offensive spark. We scored on the first two possessions he came in on 2 touchdowns. But, I don't think we need to kind of let Brian Ferentz off the hook right now, because we won the game with I think Alex Padilla is a Band-Aid to this solution where we need absolute surgery, because, the second half, the time management of the end of the first half was just atrocious. And then I don't know what happened in the second half. We just could not move the ball. And this is a bad, it's weird to say this is a bad Northwestern defense that is poor, like one of the worst in the nation, let alone the Big Ten in running. And yeah, we ran pretty good in the first half, and credit to Northwestern for making some changes, but we shouldn't be able to like not run the ball all of the second half. So, and one thing too, the defense, yes, they got 3 picks, but they had some very poor tackling. There was on one play, I think 5, Northwestern, the running back Hall broke 5 tackles, and like that doesn't seem like Iowa football.
Yeah.
So I don't think Brian Ferentz should be let off the hook. I think I still want things to be looked at in terms of offensive production. And yeah, we had a great couple drives with Padilla in, and I think he's the catalyst to that. But I don't think with the poor clock management and then just the absolute egg we laid in the second half, only 3 points, that should be taken into account too.
I agree with you. I agree with everything you just said, caller.
All right. Well, hey, I'll keep listening to your show, but thanks for taking my call.
Appreciate the call and have a great night. Don, and again, I know there was a lot to unpack in these last 2 calls, but there are a couple of questions I want to get to that I want to throw to you that we're kind of falling behind on here. First of all, let's just address the elephant in the room. Does Padilla start next week, Don? If Spencer is healthy, do you foresee Kirk going with Spencer, or do you foresee a situation where Alex wins the job based on what we saw today?
My guess it'll hinge on practice next Tuesday and Wednesday. Those are the heavy work days. I don't think they probably made a decision this week until after those 2 heavy work days. Also, I think after we practice, my guess is they decided, if we're just assuming here that Spencer was nicked up. I did hear or read somewhere that somebody from that had access to a practice made a comment during the week that a little birdie would say, you might have read the same thing. Little birdie said that Peters was not getting a lot of reps and that Padilla was getting a lot of reps with the ones. And I assume when I read that, even then, that meant he was a little bit bruised up and maybe not nearly 100%, at least as of Tuesday and Wednesday. So Padilla got more reps with the ones. That might have been just a twofold reason. One is to have him better prepared to play if Petrus faltered. And then secondly, if Petrus simply wasn't physically prepared to practice very well and service the rest of the offensive unit, then it made more sense based on that alone to have Padilla getting reps in practice. So my guess is they quickly went to Padilla after 3 possessions simply because, and that's why I said, for all I know, Petrus even volunteered that he was not 100%. Obviously, a couple of those early throws were in the dirt, And that's just a figure of speech. I don't want any of our listeners calling in asking where the dirt was, but a couple of throws that were in the ground, and they were simple plays. They were simple out routes or stop routes, and they didn't come anywhere near hitting the target. And of course, we were quickly on and off the field for those first 3 series. So it made sense based on all that Padilla would be in. And one thing I'll disagree with the caller on, he mentioned, the caller said, I wish he would have been outside the pocket more. Last time I checked, we ran at least 2 or 3 nakeds with Padilla, and I think he performed well on all cases. Hit a throw or 2, and not even the easy throw. He passed up the easy throw for the over route and hit that. So that was good to see. And of course, it was good to see too, there was a ball that went downfield. It was a go route. It was well thrown. It was thrown as a back shoulder, and that actually had to, that ended up being a good place to put the ball because the corner did have pretty good coverage over the top, and the back shoulder throw really was the right throw. And our freshman made a nice circus catch on that play too.
Don, before we get to our next caller, Ray Owens brings up a point that I already mentioned, not throwing the Hail Mary at the end of the first half. Again, mind-boggling to me. He also brings up running it on 3rd and 9, and this is consistently a frustration with me, and I know a lot of fans. Running the ball on 3rd and long, it just seems like Iowa has no confidence in 3rd and long, and we just cop out every time and say, well, we've got faith in our defense because we don't have faith in the offense. Is that a frustration for you as well, Don?
I don't remember when the 3rd and 9 from the 12, when did that occur? Was that 4th quarter?
I want to say it was earlier in the game.
Yeah. If it was early in the game, it makes even less sense to run the ball on 3rd and 9 then than it would if we were in the 4th quarter with that particular call. I agree. It's frustrating for me to see us. It would be a little bit different. I'll give you an example. If we spread people out and ran Q draw on 3rd and 9 with Padilla, now that makes some sense because that's a call that they don't expect. And maybe that draw play, when we can block everybody in the front, maybe that draw play does work. That's something we didn't do with Padilla, is call a play where he actually ran the ball and he was designed to be the runner. Of course, on a naked, he's got the option of running with the ball if he doesn't find a receiver that he likes. But you're right, just to run a vanilla running play, not likely to get a first down yardage, of course. And even if you're uncomfortable with holding the ball for a longer throw, there's nothing wrong with throwing a slant, or for that matter, working intermediate routes to our tight end. Laporta was very quiet today, and maybe that's because of the way coverage worked against him, but I don't know that. I don't think we made any great effort to get the ball to Sam. And of course, the other possibility that we did run, and it was a good play, there's always a chance with the bubble screen or a jailbreak screen. We did throw a jailbreak screen to one of our freshmen, I forget which one, and he did a nice job play. That might have been a critical down, I think, but at least I feel like if it's 3rd and 9, a jailbreak screen does have a chance to be a first down, and it is a high percentage throw and catch. So in that regard, it's not a bad call. It's a little bit like a draw play at that point, because you got blockers out in front of a receiver that's catching the ball behind the line. So I wouldn't have any issue with those kind of plays on 3rd and long, but just to run an inside or outside zone doesn't make any sense. I'll admit that.
Let's get to our next caller here, Don. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football, and thank you for waiting. Who's on the line?
Good evening, fellas. This is Blake in Arkansas. I just had a couple thoughts about the Spencer Petras situation.
Okay.
If he was banged up at the end of the last game, which and I like it, he could have been, and the coaches saw fit to give Padilla first string reps because of that. They had to have known. I would think they would know throughout the week if he was good to go, and certainly in warm-ups, whether Petras says something to him or they see it in warm-ups or during practice during the week. Maybe he doesn't have a zip on it. Maybe he's wincing, whatever it may be. I'm not sure if it's mental or if it's actually physical, but why would they even start him if that was the thought, to give Padilla reps all week long?
Valid question, Don. You want to address it?
That's a fair question, and it's not one that's easy to answer because there's an argument for not starting Petras at that point. You're right. We don't know how pregame went. Obviously my guess is Petras gave him an indication that he was ready to go based on the pregame workout. And you could still argue that the coaches are there to maybe decide otherwise. I always would pay more attention to the way the ball came off the quarterback's hand than I would what he said, because quarterbacks will typically claim that they're always ready to go. And it's not that they're being selfish in saying that. It's just that maybe it's a little wishful on their part, and maybe they feel once my adrenaline gets flowing during the game, it'll make a difference. But the bottom line, of course, the decision should lie with the coaches and not with the quarterback. Who knows what the conversation might have been, but it was obvious to me based on those early throws that if he's healthy, then he's certainly performing at a low level, and we need to give Padilla a chance. We talked about that a week ago. Would there be anything wrong with giving Padilla a chance if Petras faltered? Well, that's exactly what happened today. Petras did falter early in the game, and we turned around and gave Padilla a chance with 2 minutes and 16 seconds left in the first quarter. It didn't take long for us to decide, and I think that was a good thing. That showed decisive move on the part of the coaches, and Padilla didn't disappoint. He did seem to give the team a lift. In that regard, it seemed to be a good move.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the player wanting to play, and the desire to compete and, I can shake it off kind of thing, I definitely understand that. And there's every likelihood that, he was telling the coaches something completely different than what he was feeling physically or mentally.
Right.
The only problem that I see with it is from the beginning of the week till the end of the week, like you said, Padilla was in the mix, he's up there, and there's no shortage of eyes on a quarterback, whether it be the position coach, the offensive coordinator, the head coach, and any number of different people watching the practice, throughout the week. I just, something there doesn't seem right. I don't know if it's a selfish, or we don't want to change, or we don't want controversy, or whatever it may be, but it just, that to me is a big red flag, like an indicator, like something's not right on the team.
Yeah. Based on the way the game, I'm sorry, go ahead.
To be honest, I don't see, I'm not even tooting Padilla's horn necessarily by making these comments. I'm just saying that, when it comes to game time and putting your best foot forward, your best team on the field, I mean, it's not, something personal against the player. It doesn't have anything to do with controversy. It has to do with the betterment of the team and winning that week,
Cory,
and protecting the health. And I think that Petras would have done just as well as Padilla did, honestly, if he was mentally and physically in the game, and maybe even better. I'm like I said, I'm not touting or tooting Padilla's horn and saying, "Yep, we got to go with him the rest of the year." But that something about that situation just doesn't seem right to me. Anyway,
I appreciate your input, caller, and I understand the frustration. And I kind of said the same thing. Why are we starting the guy if he's not 100%? Yeah, I mean, I'll really wonder about that if he's not 100%, if he does the same thing next week. But Don's right. He's hit the nail on the head. It's not like Spencer's lighting the world on fire when he is healthy. I don't think there's a big enough gap right now to say Spencer's like our guy if he's 80%. If he's not 100%, even if he is 100%, maybe you start Alex.
Right. If there was a week to do it, your starter's got a physical problem, maybe a mental problem, maybe both. If you were going to pick a team to do it against, I would think that Northwestern would be one. I mean, there really doesn't seem like a better opportunity to bring in the backup and give him a shot and take a chance. I mean, protect your player and his injury, and give him a breather, a little bit of mental focus and clarity, and just go out there and compete. But it didn't quite happen that way.
I see what you're coming from there, caller.
Cory, let me make this statement.
Have a good evening, fellas.
All right, appreciate the call. Go ahead, Don.
This statement, Cory. If we replace those numbers on the screen, 18 for 28 for 172, if we replace Alex Padilla with Spencer Petras, 18 for 28 for 172 and no picks, especially factoring in half of those 18 completions were not really easy throws and catches. And you mentioned there were some drops in there too.
Yeah, at least 3 or 4. At least 3 or 4.
If those numbers belong to Spencer, we'd feel pretty good about Spencer.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Because let's face it, for the season, we're throwing at something less than 60%, right?
Absolutely.
So 18 for 28 sounds pretty good to me.
Before we get to our next caller here, Don, Jackie says she's confused as to how Wisconsin has the tiebreaker. Iowa hasn't been to the Big Ten Championship since 2015. Wisconsin has been several times. Could you explain how this works? It's got nothing to do with past results, Jackie. It's got to do with the fact that Wisconsin has beaten Iowa. They've beaten Purdue. And Iowa lost to Wisconsin and Purdue. So there's your tiebreaker right there. And of course, when you have a 3-team tie, it comes down to record versus those common opponents. And of course, the West, you can kind of go down the tiebreaker levels there. But let's get to our next call here. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, this is Jared Barger.
Jared, how are you today?
Good. I'm feeling pretty good. I have to say, there's a lot you can talk about, obviously, and a lot that you've discussed regarding some questionable decisions. But I think at the end of the day, snapping the losing streak, you can't really complain about that. We got back in the win column, and that's a good thing.
Yep.
And I think there's some stuff to build upon. I really was impressed with Alex from the first. I think he came in, he hit a short pass, and his second pass, wasn't it like 19 yards to Keegan Johnson, I believe? And he just looked very comfortable right from the get-go. And I thought that was good. But the question I have, I just started watching the show about half hour ago. So I'm sorry if you have gotten to this already. Sure. But could we see a situation going forward, potentially, do you think we would, where we could have 2 quarterbacks if Petrus is healthy? Because we've seen Purdue do that this year. They have 3, I believe. And more teams are starting to do that in college football, and could you see that happening on this Iowa team?
I brought it up earlier. I would like to see that at least in the immediate future, but Don, do you want to expound on that?
I think if there's if the backup brings something entirely different to the offense than the starter, then it does make more sense. And the classic example would be a pocket passer versus a combination quarterback, a guy that is a much bigger threat to run, a guy that's maybe better out of the pocket than in the pocket, somebody with 2 entirely different skill sets. I used to always like the idea of the backup having a different set than the starter, simply because if there was a chance you were going to play him, they would have to prepare for 2 different quarterbacks, and it would cut into the preparation they would have for the starter. And maybe they're preparing for the backup that never shows, depending on how well the game plays out. But there's nothing wrong at all with using a second quarterback. And I think the only thing that's critical, and I mentioned this when Purdue played us, it was obvious to me that the second and third quarterbacks, they only played maybe a total of 10 snaps in the entire game, but they knew exactly what those plays were going to be even before they went on the field. And in that regard, they were very well prepared for those few snaps that were critical to the success of the game.
Right. And before we go back to you, Jared, I want to address this question. Someone's asking about the status of Riley Moss. Thought he had a chance to play tonight. Sounds like he's got a chance next week, but he was ruled out tonight. And then one other thing here, comment from Ellen. I'm going to read this word for word. Sorry, but my Hawkeyes will lose the remaining games, including the bowl game. My Hawks are terrible and terrible coaching on offense again. I don't know why you're watching if the Hawks are this bad. I mean, we appreciate you watching, but let's be real here and let's not overreact. This is still a 7-2 football team. And as much as I've criticized the coaching staff, I think that's going way beyond reality. But anyways, back to you, Jared. Anything else for Don or myself?
I think, that I didn't get to watch every single snap. I had the game going while I was at work, actually. But I got to see a majority of the first half, and I liked what I saw. But I think the coaching is still a problem, the offensive coaching anyway. And I'm sure you've talked all about the time management and the clock management, but just play calling. I mean, they should have been able to put up another touchdown at least in the second half, just with the way they were moving the ball. And it just feels like no matter who's starting and no matter who's playing well at quarterback, just seems like there's a pretty low ceiling on this offense. And I know the defense can still win them some games, but I hope Wisconsin loses, and I hope they make it to the Big Ten championship, and hope they win the Big Ten championship. But it just feels like there is a ceiling on this football team as long as the offensive coaching is like this.
I see what you're coming from. I don't argue with any of it, but you're right. They're still in the race for a Big Ten title, and it's great to at least be in that position in November.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's build upon this win, and let's win out.
All right, appreciate
Cory,
the call, Jared.
Let me comment, Cory, about B. Wagner's his message there. Stick with Padilla. He makes quicker decisions and is more comfortable in the pocket. Coverage for O-line weakness. To be honest with you, all that logic makes a lot of sense. Let's face it, our O-line is a weak aspect of our offense, and if we have matchup difficulties against a good Minnesota defense, they're a pretty solid defense, then obviously Padilla does give us a better chance to escape some sacks that have been costing us a lot here lately in recent games. He does have better escapability. There's no doubt about that. He did a good job protecting the ball. I'll say that. Did Northwestern ever get their fingers on a ball or their hands on a ball tonight? I don't think so.
No, and the one, well, we can talk about officiating at some point, Don. And I have noticed, I'll give you credit, Don. You're a former coach. I never really hear you lay into the officials, but man, it was bad tonight, and we can talk about that later. But the one play where it was called a fumble and it was clearly a forward pass, I don't know what the official that called it a fumble on the field. I understand you let the play go, but if we're going by that theory, Don, that the referee made the call because he wanted to let the play go, and then we're going to call it back. If that didn't hold true in the first half when Iowa forced a fumble and Kirk was going livid because they called it an incomplete catch. I don't know if you remember the play I'm talking about.
Northwestern. I do. Is that right in front of our bench?
Yeah, so that reverses that whole mindset that you let a play out and then we can call it back. But anyways, no, I don't think they got their hands on the ball. And you that's a valid point because Padilla is undersized when you compare him to the bigger Spencer Petras.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important. Sometimes, you tend to favor the guy that simply looks the part more so than someone else. And you need to go by results. And a good example, just thinking about baseball, that little short guy for Houston that leads off, he's a great player. He's about 5'5", I think, but he's a great baseball player. And he actually hits with power. You wouldn't think he could hit with power. You might think you'd rather have a 6'3" guy that weighs 220 pounds to swing his bat. But truth of it is, what's the guy's name? I can't think of it now. Do we have any Houston fans out there? What's their leadoff hitter? He's fun to watch.
The Astros?
Yeah.
Oh, you're asking the wrong guy here, Don.
Wrong guy? Okay, one of our listeners will know who it is. I forget his name.
Maybe it's the caller on the line here. Let's go ahead and go to our caller. Caller, do you know the Houston Astros hitter that Don's talking about?
No, I don't. I'm a Cubs fan.
I think, Don, you're a Cubs fan, aren't you?
Well, I was until they traded away three of the best players.
Yeah. We appreciate your call, though, caller. Do you want to talk about the Hawks?
Yeah, this is Robert from down in Arkansas.
Hey, Robert.
Hello. I just got done watching Kirk Ferentz' post-game interview on the Big Ten channel.
Okay.
And hey, I hate to be a downer, but he was asked, first of all, he was asked what was wrong with Petras and at the beginning of the game, and he said it was due to the injuries he received last week's game. Then he was, he kind of hem-haws around his answers to me, but he was also asked if Padilla will be the starting quarterback in next week's game. And his response was he's not going to penalize a player for being hurt. So in other words, I would probably think that Padilla will not be the starter.
Well, I will say this, Don, and I do want to get your input. I hate that response. And again, I'm relying on what Robert's saying here, but if that's a response from Kirk Ferentz, see, that's not how that works with other positions, because oftentimes you see backups, get time because of injuries, and then the starters never earn their spots back. Don, am I wrong about this?
No, you're right. What I would fully expect to happen would be they're both evaluated in practice, and the guy that, and let's face it, the way Padilla played today, he certainly didn't how do I say this? He didn't hurt his chances of being our starter.
Right.
He performed okay. Frankly, everybody would wish their backup quarterback would play as well as what Padilla played today.
That was his exact words. Exact words. And that's the reason I was calling you, because you were talking about, who might be the starter in next week's game. And then I just happened to be watching the Big Chin channel when he was being interviewed, and I listened to it, and that's what he said. So,
well, I understand the reasoning. You don't lose the job because you go down with an injury, Don, but it's a result of other factors that are associated with not being in the game, right?
Right.
So I agree with you, caller. That's frustrating.
I was agreeing with you that, maybe they would wait till Monday or Tuesday and let them battle it out. But
yeah,
to me, that makes perfect sense. Right now, honestly, there's a big question in my mind as to who the better quarterback is. Based on the way Padilla played today, I think any logical person would have some doubt as to who's the better player.
I would think so. And I agree with you all. I agree with you and Don both. I think our timeout usage was just horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Yep.
I just don't understand.
I don't either.
So, but that's what I just wanted to call and tell you what Kurt Faraday said on his interview.
Oh, appreciate the call, Robert, and hope you can continue to listen tonight.
Yes, sir. Have a good night.
All right. Take care.
It is a little disappointing if that's exactly the way it played out after the game.
Yeah, and again, I understand that Kirk is trying to balance. We use the word psyches. I like to use that word as it relates to quarterbacks, and so maybe there's some of that going on. But I don't know why you can't just say, if you're Kirk, look, we have an open competition every week, like every position. So we'll just wait and see. You don't even have to address the injury. If Spencer's healthy, then he'll have a chance to start. If Alex is healthy, he'll have a chance to start.
And the decision will be made based on what we see
right
on Tuesday and Wednesday, those days in particular.
Do want to say hi to Hawkeye Howard, and he adds here that the play calling still sucks. I wouldn't necessarily use that terminology in a public setting, but it's not impressive to me at all. Underway shift colors brings up the block punt. Don, that was surprising. We haven't seen gaffes like that in special teams. What happened there? Because obviously Torrey's trying to make a kind of hesitate there. If you call it, I guess it was a rugby style punt, right? And he's trying to wait out his coverage team getting down the field.
Yeah, most of the blame goes to the blockers on that right side. If I had to pinpoint one guy, it was number 37. He was lined up as a right end. And for some odd reason, it didn't make much sense. For some odd reason, the right end, the right tackle, the right guard, all of those players on the right side all slid inside to protect. And the odd thing about it, of course, is Taylor was stepping to his right. So no surprise that a guy was able to get to that block point. You could assign a little bit of blame to Taylor simply because it bugs me sometimes when he thinks he can buy time by working toward the line of scrimmage, even if it's at an angle, maybe a 45-degree angle as he's running to his right. But obviously, if the players understand where that block point might be, in the case of a rugby punt, that is where it's going to be. That Northwestern guy did a great job of getting to that block point. And in that regard, I'd say a little bit of it's on Taylor, because if nothing else, he should recognize, have an awareness, that, of course, that a guy might be coming quicker than he might expect. The get-off time was more than 2 seconds, I'll promise you.
All right. Don, I love this comment. Charles, he always comes up with the clever hashtags. Don spoke about that in preseason with those rugby-style kicks. Hashtag Donstradamus. great. I love it, Charles.
Did you notice today in the Purdue game, key play versus rugby punt, they put two guys back deep and one guy fielded one on the dead run. Right. And it made about a 48-yard difference in field position from one punt to the next.
That was Purdue.
Yeah, Purdue.
Purdue seems to be pretty good on game day.
Yeah, they make a lot of good decisions.
They do.
On both offense, defense, and kicking. All three.
By the way, I want to let everybody know we're going to get to some comments that we're falling behind on, but let me bring up our number here, 860-499-3332, 860-499-3332. For the first time in about, half an hour, all of our lines are open right now. So give us a call, sound off, talk about whatever you want to talk about with Don, ask him a question, give your take on the quarterback situation, whatever floats your boat. And I do want to remind everybody, if you're listening here today, enjoying the content, join us over at From the Hawkeye of the Storm as well, our weekly podcast, and as well as postgame shows for Iowa men's basketball, which we'll talk about later on during our show. All right, let's filter through some of the comments here. There were a couple that I did want to get to. I'm going to butcher this name here. Mr. Sato, he says, it seems like Petrus locks on a Laporta, Reganey, Jones versus Padilla, looking more to our wide receivers, specifically 6. I will say, I'll give Spencer some credit here, Don. Spencer has, like last week, he was looking Keegan Johnson's way a lot. I think the game plan offensively has been to get number 6 the ball more, but I do understand where our user is coming from here. And it does seem, you mentioned it, Don, Padilla seems to make those decisions quicker, and he's got a nice quick release.
Yeah, he does. He looked very decisive back there with his receiver selection. To be honest with you, I thought he had an edge on that same ability to process what's happening. Had an edge over Spencer in that regard based on how he played tonight.
All right, we got another call here. Thank you for calling Iowa postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Rob.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I think Keegan Johnson is the best offensive player we have had in a long time. I think the guy is extremely special. I'm a big fan of Bruce as well, but I think he has been criminally underutilized up until today, and kind of wanted to know your thoughts on that. I know about 15 years ago, we had a true freshman named Dominique Douglas who pretty much was our go-to guy the one year he was there. So we do have a history of using freshman receivers, but I think this guy can be real special. And it was good to see him a little more utilized today, but I think we were pretty safe throwing down to him, and maybe if he doesn't catch it, getting a PI call.
I agree with you, caller, and we have a question here from Tyler as well. He's asking what happened with Tyrone Tracy at the end of the game. He wasn't in there. Well, our caller just brought it up, Don. Keegan Johnson is outplaying Tyrone Tracy, and even when Tracy, I believe, dropped another ball, this time from Alex early in the game, they've tried to get him the ball, and unfortunately, he's had a bugaboo with drops, Don.
Yeah, he had at least a catch or two. I think maybe he was targeted at least 3 times tonight. I guess I don't know that for a fact, but I remember for sure there were a couple of balls that went his way. And he caught a ball breaking back toward the middle of the field, and he fought for extra yardage. It was sometime in the second half. So it showed good effort on his part, but you can't say that he's been more productive than any number of other receivers. I'm glad he's available to us. I think I did read this somewhere. He actually got more snaps than any single receiver last week, if I'm not mistaken. So they're giving him every opportunity to make more plays. And tonight he had several chances too. And it's kind of hard to know for sure what went wrong. Maybe there were plays when he was the primary receiver and he didn't get the ball. But he certainly was out there for a fair number of snaps. And in that regard, you shouldn't, as a player, you shouldn't just assume that if you don't get to touch the ball, that means that you were wasted. That's not true at all. Every player has value on every play. and you really shouldn't. You should take as much pride in your blocking as you do your ability to catch a pass. Otherwise, you're not much of a player.
And caller, I did say about a week or two ago, I believe it was before the Wisconsin game, that I think Keegan Johnson is the best skill position player Iowa has, and that includes Tyler Goodson. That's how good I think Keegan Johnson is. So I'm all in on what you just said.
Absolutely.
And I'm not. That's not to take away from guys like Tyrone or certainly Tyler Goodson, but Keegan Johnson's hands, his speed, his route running, his ability, his yards after catch. He's just a freshman, but they definitely got a good one. There's no question about it. And I think we lost our caller there. He just dropped off. So caller, if you lost your connection, it sounded like he was in the car. So if he gets connection and wants to call us back, 860-499-3332. But Don, your thoughts on Keegan Johnson? He never seems to disappoint, although he did have a drop or two today. But that's going to happen here and there. I don't want to dismiss that because we're dogging on Tyrone for the same thing. But Keegan typically is very sure-handed.
Yeah, I like both the freshmen because they act when they do possess the ball. They act like they actually expect that they're going to be able to do something with it, and they take steps to get that done. You question their effort, and they're certainly fearless as far as being worried about catching a ball in the crowd, or for that matter, running out of bounds, rather than fighting for extra yardage by staying in bounds. No issues there in that regard. They're really quality players, and I'm glad to see that I think they're feeling more and more comfortable. And obviously Padilla's got a high comfort level with them, because one of the reasons they got the ball is because Padilla was the one getting it to them.
Yeah, and I understand Tyler Almond here. I understand his frustration because Tyrone has shown the ability to be explosive. But you're right, Don. They're not dismissing him from the game plan, but he's got to do something. He's got to make some guys miss and make a play to get him going again, because he's holding himself back. I don't think Iowa, targets are one thing, but you've got to get open. You've got to put yourself in a position to succeed. And right now, Keegan's doing a better job of that. But it does not mean you eliminate Tyrone Tracy from your game plan. And I do want to take our next call here. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
James.
You said James? Hello? Are you with us? Can you hear us, James?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now, James.
Oh, sorry about that. I had to go
You're-
upstairs. Why do you think Tyler Goodson wasn't in the game in the last drive?
That's a mystery to me.
Gavin in for Tyler.
We don't know. I have no idea. I asked the same question earlier in the show.
I would definitely confuse me, because Tyler gives you the best opportunity to be successful in that situation. You just sub him out.
Yeah, Don, and it didn't. I thought maybe Tyler had gotten banged up, but he looked fine on the sideline. Then he comes in on third down.
He wasn't even in on the original third down, I don't think. I think they took a timeout and then put him in. I think Gavin was still in, and then they took the timeout. And then they put him in after the timeout.
Yeah, one of many play calling game day decisions with this coaching staff that I kind of furrow my eyebrow at week after week, caller.
And then I have my thing in the chat where I said, I think the reason they go with Patterson, I've seen this in my 25 years of watching Iowa, is the fact that they're scared to be proven wrong. So, if they take Patterson out and bench Patterson, they look wrong because they started Patterson at the beginning of the year. So they look wrong. So they're like, oh, well, we were wrong, and we don't want to be wrong. So we're going to keep rocking with Patterson, even though he's not the person that is right for this team.
Well, I hope there's nothing to that, Don. Do you want to, this coaching staff. I have a hard time believing that the coaching staff is more concerned with being proven wrong. That would indicate a bigger issue with pride on the coaching staff.
Yeah. I guess it's human nature to want your choices to work out, and you're going to take steps to try to give them every opportunity to work out. And in that regard, you can bet that Spencer going forward is going to be given every chance to keep his job. I don't know if that'll show up next Saturday in terms of who gets how many snaps. But obviously, we've hung in there with him a long time, and as you know, he's got a good record as a starter. But having said that, I think Spencer should give a lot of credit to the defense for them more than doing their part. So there were games, I even said this on the air a while back in time, someone had argued that he was a great player and had been for a long time. And I said, well, with all due respect, there were games we won last year in spite of Spencer's performance. And that didn't mean that he was the only guy that played a subpar game. It simply meant that, in my estimation, there were several games where he was subpar, and yet we still won. So, it's, as a coach, you got to do what's best for the team, and sometimes it is frustrating to find that your second team player might be the better player. And the only response to that I would give as an old coach is the only way to know for sure how someone's going to play is to see them on Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. Tuesday and Wednesday don't tell you enough about how they're going to play on Saturday. There's that phrase, he's a gamer, or maybe he's not a gamer. Some players do play better when the lights are on. And maybe a practice evaluation is not a good indication of how they play in a game. I don't know how Padilla practiced this week, but certainly he played okay tonight. And I'll put it this way, I have more confidence in Padilla now than I did before the game because I thought he gave a good account of himself tonight.
Absolutely, I agree. And I do want to extend our appreciation from this compliment from James Hemmer, says he's been watching every week, and also added that Padilla looked good as well as the defense. So agree with that. Anything else, caller?
I was gonna say, I feel like this might turn into a situation of Beathard and Rudock, because Rudock was still a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but Beathard just played better than him and earned the spot, and then Rudock left. I don't know if this is gonna turn into that situation, but I feel like it'll be intriguing to see if it turns into that kind of situation.
Well, let's remember one thing, caller, before I let you go here. Let's just remember that the quarterback competition before the 2013 season was neck and neck between Beathard, Rudock, and Cody Sokol. And according to this coaching staff, it's never been close. It's always been Spencer Petras. So there is a difference there, but you might be right. It may, like Don said, it might just be a situation where Alex Padilla is a better gamer. So you might be onto something there. We'll see.
All right. Yep. Talk to you later. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate the call. All right. Before we get to our next caller here, Don, I do want to address a question here or a comment. Jack says that he works at a restaurant. I always love these types of comments, Don. He works at a restaurant that caters for the Iowa football team every week. And this past week, he saw Riley Moss walking around fine, so he would not be surprised to see him against Minnesota. So you heard it first here, Don. According to Jack Hinman, Riley Moss will be playing next week against Minnesota.
Well, if he's walking around fine in the dinner hall, I don't think that equates very well to performing well in Kinnick next weekend. But I do feel that he'll be back. I think there was an outside chance he would make it for the Northwestern game, and obviously he didn't injure himself today, so I would expect that he'll play next week.
All right, and we do have another caller, but Don, is this the baseball player you were wanting?
Thank God. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. Altuve's the guy.
Yep, and it's not just Ben. It's also Dominique. It's also Springtime 0502. So they got us covered in the chat here, Don. Altuve's the guy. All right, thank you for calling. Oh, we lost. Did we lose our caller? Don't know if this is the same caller, but we do have another caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Well, I was trying to get more. I guess I called the wrong number today. Hey, but I do love our football. I'm a Clemson fan. East Carolina fan. But I graduated from East Carolina. But I do love Iowa football going back to the 80s and 90s with Chet Long and the Pete locker rooms and the Hate and Fry. You know, the Hawkeyes, because they remind me of my Pittsburgh Steelers. Tough and strong and good defense.
Caller?
Yes.
Do you know the two gentlemen you're talking to right now, or do you know specifically the gentleman that's not talking but who's sidekicking with me on the show right now?
Who's that?
This is Coach Don Patterson. He was the offensive coordinator under Hayden Fry when Chuck Long was here.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't know. Like I said, I thought I'll call a Mark's regular show. But hey, yeah, man, it's good to meet a legend, man. I mean, I remember that our game versus Michigan. I think y'all was 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3. I still remember that as a kid.
And
My
Don,
name's DeAndre.
And Cory, you're giving me a little too much credit. I was not.
You weren't the OC. You weren't the OC when Chuck was
coordinator in 1985. That was a little bit later.
You were on the so what were you coaching in 1985, Don?
I was coaching tight ends.
Okay, sorry. Excuse me, caller. He was the tight ends coach when Chuck was here, and he was the OC later. But you are talking to a living legend right here, Don Patterson.
Wow, that's amazing. So you the one that invented this tight end standing up at the end of the line of scrimmage instead of getting the 3-point stance?
Yes, I could tell you how that all started. It started at North Texas. We had a guy named Darrell Terrell that was maybe 6'4" and about 220 pounds. He was undersized to be playing tight end. And Coach Fry asked our defensive coordinator, what would you do with a tight end standing up? And Bill said, well, I think it'd be a little harder for the strong safety to see into the backfield because that tight end would be kind of in the line of sight between him and the quarterback. And then he asked the outside linebacker coach, what would you do if you had to play against a stand-up tight end? And he said, well, I think I'd end up playing a lot taller than what I would otherwise do, because it seemed awkward if I didn't play a little bit taller. And that very first or second year we played Oklahoma, and they had an outside linebacker that was an animal, a great player, the kind of guy whose knuckles were almost dragging on the ground when he played, except that game he didn't play as well. I think because he was a little bit out of his element. He was playing taller than normal, in part just because the tight end was lined up in a 2-point stance. And as Cory knows, the tight end was another set of eyes to the quarterback and was able to pick up stunts that the quarterback might not see. And in that regard, he was an insurance policy for our quarterback and saved our quarterback any number of times by picking up stunts that the quarterback couldn't see before the snap.
Okay. Well, I thank y'all. Maybe I'll catch one next time. Good win for Iowa today. Y'all about the only outside of Michigan State. Y'all about one of the few Big Ten teams I actually like watching play when y'all do play. Y'all have a great night.
You as well, John. I appreciate the phone call.
Yes, sir.
All right. I like that call. That was kind of a cool thing, Don. Be able to talk to someone who admired you and he didn't even know it. So that's really cool. Let's move on to our next caller here. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Yeah, this is Matt Allison. How you doing tonight?
We're good, Matt. How are you?
Pretty good. Originally from Cedar Rapids, or I live in Cedar Rapids now, but I'm out of town right now. But yeah, I was happy with the win today. Just had a quick question for you. What did you think of? Seemed like there was an awful lot of missed tackles on defense. Very uncharacteristic.
There were some missed tackles, Don. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I said going into the game, I was a little concerned about that running back because he had made a lot of explosive plays over the course of the season. I don't know how many yards he'd run for, but he's got one of the better totals of any running back in the Big Ten. I think maybe he's third or fourth in the conference, maybe coming in today. And sure enough, Hall gets loose for the touchdown there in the second half. He's a pretty elusive guy. Now that doesn't. You're right. There were some missed tackles in there. I will say that Kerner had a touchdown saving tackle. I believe that might have been Hull also, as I recall. Is that his name, Hull? Hull.
Hull.
Hull, yeah. So I don't know. I like to give credit to the guy that's carrying the ball. Sometimes they made good sharp cuts, and the mistakes some players make, of course, they're always trying for a big hit. And if they're trying for a big hit, that means they're a little bit overextended in trying to make a play. And of course, if a back's able to put his foot in the ground and change directions, you're going to miss some. So there's some truth to what you say. We missed some tackles today, but I give some credit to the guys that were making us miss too. The bottom line is we still did a pretty good job of eliminating big plays. I don't know how many we gave up today, but not too many. And a couple of them were really some circus catches. Now, those weren't missed tackles, but, you talk about our struggles in the second half. I have to give I think right now Northwestern's pretty happy with their backup quarterback too, the guy that played all day today. They decided to go with him, and he gave a pretty good account of himself, I think. He was a competitor, I'll say that. And they didn't give up. They converted any number of times when the odds were against them in the second half. And that's what made it interesting. As I started off by saying, it was disappointing that we couldn't put them away. It was still a one-score game, even when they were kicking off to us at the end of the game. And in that regard, of course, it was enough to be a little bit nervous. But thankfully, it didn't last long. We intercepted. That's one of the rules of two-minute offense. Of course, I don't recall how much time they had, Cory, when that last drive started. But one of the cardinal rules of two-minute offense is possession of the ball means everything. So you don't throw the ball up for grabs with a minute left or a minute and a half, whatever the time was.
At least a minute and a half. You keep
the pressure on the other team.
Right.
Now, when you get down to the last play, the next to last play, obviously you might have to take a really slim chance to make something happen. But early on, just keep the pressure on the other team. Dump the ball if you have to. Pull it down and run with it. Run plays that aren't designed to be home runs, but are designed to make first downs, such as screen passes and swing passes and bubble screens, things like that, where you can get out of bounds with the ball, get upfield, get some yardage, get out of bounds. That's how you move the ball with two-minute offense is a series of short plays that don't even require you to take a timeout, because you're getting out of bounds with the ball. Or if you're not getting out of bounds, talking about smart clock management, you need to recognize as a ball carrier or receiver, okay, I'm not going to be able to make it off the field. And basically that means I'm somewhere in between the hash marks. Well, at that point, there's only one way you can stop the clock, and that's to make a first down. So at that point, don't even try to run for the sideline. Just try to get down the field and make a first down and at least stop the clock while the chains move so that we can have a chance to get a lot of snaps in a short amount of time.
Excellent. Well, I sure appreciate taking my call. It also does seem to me like we might be pulling up a little short sometimes on the quarterback for just because we're afraid of getting penalties. And that's probably maybe not a bad thing because I don't know about you guys, but I think the officiating wasn't awesome tonight. But what do you think?
That's an understatement, caller. The officiating was atrocious. Don?
Yeah, it's kind of unusual when both coaches are upset with the officiating, but tonight you saw that. And there were plays that both coaches had a good reason to be upset.
What was Pat Fitzgerald penalized for?
It was considered unsportsmanlike conduct, I believe is the way they phrased it.
Because he put his hands on his head?
I was really mystified with what happened there. I think he lost his stocking cap, maybe the fact that the cap came off, but he certainly didn't throw it. He was upset with the call and he ducked his head, and I think at that point his headphones and his stocking cap came off his head, but it's not like he threw them.
It wasn't like Bo Pelini throwing his hat at the official.
No, nothing like that. So I feel badly for Fitz that call was made. You did notice, I couldn't help but notice when the players came to the bench, you could see him say, "I'm sorry. That's my fault." He said that.
He's a stand-up coach, Don.
He is.
There's no question about it. Oliver, did you see something on the unsportsmanlike penalty call?
No, I didn't see any more than you all saw. The only thing I was going to say is, from watching it on TV, we don't have the advantage of hearing what he might be saying. So,
sure.
Maybe he let something slip that the official didn't like.
It could be, but then I heard later you could read Phil Parker's lips, and I read several F-bombs out of his mouth, and there was no call. But I get what you're saying, caller. I said the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for taking my call, guys. You do a great job.
All right. Appreciate the compliment. Appreciate the call. And the comment of the night, Don, John quotes me. He says, I wouldn't say play calling sucks in public. That is very true. I did say that on tonight's show, Don.
That is a quote, huh?
It is a quote. Accurate. Ann says Padilla has earned the starting position. Spaghetti Factory says that's Iowa football. At least we don't chase points due to analytics. Well, the I wouldn't say Iowa always follows the analytics, but that's just my opinion. Case in point, last week, Iowa doesn't even attempt a deep ball in the first quarter when first quarter scoring was essential to victory over a Wisconsin team that had been, you could say, governed by that analytic throughout their entire season. So I don't know that Iowa always functions off of the analytics. But I will say that. Don, we're over an hour, but we're going strong. Do you have any hesitation to continue? I know it's getting late. You're a night owl, but do you have a few more minutes, or do you need to get going?
I'm okay. We can continue as long as people have questions. We'll give them the opportunity to get them answered.
We've got 168 people listening right now, so we appreciate that, even late on a Saturday. Joby says, I think playing both QBs is the best option. He agrees with you, Don. Different skill sets, comparable players, give the opponent's D more to worry about and prepare for. And John says that I said our offense. I did say the offense sucked last week. I did say that. But I'm not saying that the play calling in general sucks. See, now I'm trying to dig myself out of a hole, Don, and I'll just allow our next caller to help me do that. So let's go to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame at the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hi, it's Amy, the Iowa nurse.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I just had a couple comments. First, Tyler Goodson, I did think he should have been playing at the end, and I was relieved when we got the interception because it was just a relief that they intercepted that. And then next game, I think it would be nice to see Alex start off, and if he runs into trouble, then put Spencer in.
Yeah.
And in the Big Ten, is there no teams undefeated now?
Well, in the Big Ten, Ohio State is undefeated, but overall, no, because Michigan State lost today.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And then I did have one question for the coach.
Okay.
And I know that you are taking one game at a time and you just play that, but do any of the upcoming games look more of a threat to Iowa, or are there any games that look like that are coming up that look like they might cause some trouble for Iowa?
I think the Gophers are going to present some problems. They're in an angry mood because they lost to Illinois today at home. So there's a lot riding on the game. Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, Cory, if Minnesota wins out, then that means they for sure represent even now. Isn't that true? No, I guess it's not true.
No, because they haven't played Wisconsin yet. Well, no, let's think about this. Wisconsin's just got 2 losses. So, yeah, you're right. If Wisconsin beats Minnesota, they're in. Now, if Minnesota were to win out from here, they're in, correct? Because they beat Purdue. Yeah.
I lost you, Cory.
That means they would. Are you with us, Don?
Yeah, you're back now. I lost you there for a minute, though.
Yeah, Minnesota, if they win out, that means they've beaten Iowa, Purdue, and Wisconsin. So, yeah, Minnesota controls their own destiny right now, as does Wisconsin. Iowa and Purdue do not, but all 4 of those teams are still involved.
Let me make one quick comment about Minnesota based on watching the Illinois game today. Those 330-pound linemen come in handy for run blocking, but when you get into obvious passing situations, pass protection is a problem for those guys. And that's something for us to remember next weekend. It's one of those games where it's going to be imperative to get off to a good start again and not play from behind. And if we can force Minnesota to play from behind, they have issues. They have issues with pass protection in particular. So if they have to throw the ball a lot, and if you go back and look at a lot of their passing game, a lot of it is what we call RPOs. You know what RPOs are. You know, it's play action fakes, and the quarterback decides, you know, based on the way the defense is aligned, whether or not to pull the ball and throw it, typically on a slant route. And one reason they're successful with it is because they're a threat to run the ball right up the gut so much of the time. Makes them vulnerable on the pass. But obviously, if they're playing from behind, that's a problem because you're not quite so concerned with them just running the ball. It's going to be hard for them to beat you if they can't throw it, if they're playing from behind like they were today. So yeah. I think they got exposed during the fourth quarter when they had to throw the ball, and that's when they ran into protection problems against Illinois.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And Amy, to answer your question from my vantage point, Minnesota's a scare, Illinois is a scare, Nebraska's a scare. Based on how Illinois and Nebraska play today, none of these games are going to be walkovers. I mean, Iowa one drive was the difference between a loss against maybe the worst team in this division today. So every game, Iowa's going to have to play its best. The only thing I would disagree with you on, Amy, you said starting Petrus, and then starting Padilla, and if he starts to play poorly, you pull him and put Petrus back in there. I don't think you want to get into that habit. And Don, maybe you can clarify what I'm thinking here, but you don't want to put a guy in and let him know that he's got a short leash. I mean, Petrus was allowed a lot of time and a lot of mistakes. If Padilla throws a pick on the first drive next week, that doesn't mean you yank him, does it?
No, absolutely not. You're exactly right. You know, if you decide to start Padilla, then you give him a chance to, if he makes a mistake early in the game, you give him a chance to correct it and move on. And you need to be judged not by that snapshot moment, but by the bulk of your play. And if you have a mistake or two, that only means you're human. You know, there are all kinds of quarterbacks that make mistakes, and yet they overcome them as the game plays out.
Anything else to add, Amy?
Yep. No, I understand that. That makes sense. But I know the next two games are home games, so against Minnesota and Illinois, so we have that advantage.
Right. And two more chances to wave at the kids there in the children's hospital, so that's always a good thing too.
Yeah, and which my granddaughter's back in there, so they can wave up at her.
Well, I'm sad to hear that your granddaughter is in there, but I hope that she's given some comfort by some waves from some fans on Saturday.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you for having me on, and you guys are doing a great job.
Appreciate it, Amy. Have a great night, okay?
You too.
All right.
Cory, I have a question for you. Do we have a start time for the Minnesota game?
We do not. That is still TBA unless that's been, and I can check, but I have not gotten. No, I don't have anything.
Well, I'm hoping for 2:30 over 11. If we have an 11 o'clock start, we'll have some people that are late to get to the game. And I don't really want it to be a night game because if it's a little bit cool, people have a tendency to sit on their hands too much. So I'd rather have a 2 o'clock or 2:30 start, something like that.
Absolutely. And I apologize. We must have lost our caller there that was on with us a moment ago. Ben brings up Gavin Williams and the element of power that he brings that nobody else really does. Seems to be more of that downhill runner, although Kelly Martin, you know, it was interesting. You brought up Kelly Martin earlier today, Don. I did see him. He was there. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, if a guy is ruled out, he doesn't typically travel with the team to a road game. Am I correct?
No, that's not really correct. It depends on his status on the team. If he's a leader, such as Kelly Martin, I think Kelly Martin's one of our permanent captains, I think. I know he's been out for a coin toss or two. And the travel squad now, I believe it's 74 players. So that gives you a little bit of latitude. A guy that's a key player that's out with injury. I'll give you another example. The number one running back for Minnesota, of course, they were playing at home, so that's not a good example. But even when Minnesota travels, I'm pretty sure that Ibrahim, or however it's pronounced, their number one running back, I'm pretty sure he's traveling with the team every week. There's nothing says you cannot travel an injured player. And I suspect that Riley Moss was on our bench tonight, wasn't he? I think.
I haven't seen Riley Moss. That's why I'm bringing this up, because I haven't seen him ever since he's gotten hurt. Have you?
I haven't noticed, honestly, if he's on the bench or not. But I do know that there's no rule against traveling an injured player. So if you have room to travel him, obviously you would. Now, you wouldn't travel a guy at the expense of leaving some player at home that might actually figure into the game plan. But if you have room for him, and that's one good thing about the expanded travel roster, maybe those last few slots could go to an injured player that still has great value in terms of leadership on the bench.
Question here from Kyle. Do you think the game plan was streamlined for Padilla to plays he was comfortable with and could execute? Will they add more to his plate next week? My answer to that question is I don't think it was any more streamlined than what we see with Spencer. Am I wrong, Don?
No, I think you're right. And I think the plays they called today with Padilla are the same plays in general that they would have called for Spencer.
Absolutely agree with that. Charles can't see any way you start Petrus next week. There's going to be a lot of upset fans if that does happen. Jakob22 wants to know if you were able to watch Army Air Force today, Don.
Yes, I did. Army was very, very fortunate, but we'll take it.
Absolutely.
They had the fumble down the goal line, you might have seen, and number 77 recovers the fumble in the end zone for what ended up being the winning touchdown. So I'm happy that Army was able to beat the Zoomies, as we call them. The Air Force cadets are Zoomies for obvious reasons. Those jets go pretty fast.
Ray Owen says, go Army. Ron says, Padilla seems to find his receivers quicker, pull the trigger faster. Would agree with that. Kevin says, he says that play calling sucks in public all the time. Yeah, Kyle says the same thing. A win's a win, but 17 points won't win many games. I would agree with you. And Northwestern's not a great team. I think we can all agree with that. All right. I do want to address a couple things here before we let you go, Don.
Okay.
I have a lot of notes. I'm going to try to sort through these, and we do have a caller on hold, but I do want to get to these notes before I forget. The targeting play. So it was overruled. I know this targeting issue needs to be something that officials look at in the offseason. I actually thought it probably should have been targeting because it was clear the defender could have went low and he decided to go high. I don't care about the helmet to helmet because you go high, whether it's helmet to helmet or not. Don, what are your thoughts?
I fully expected that the call would be upheld. I did, and you've heard me complain here in recent weeks that to me it's a little bit too easy for a guy to get tossed out of a game. And that sounds odd coming from an offensive coach, but to me, we've gone overboard with identifying targeting as a foul. And when I saw the replay, there was a little bit of helmet to helmet contact, and it was a hard hit. So I fully expected when they reviewed it that he would be eliminated from the game.
Right. I agree. B. Wagner says he enjoys the show. We appreciate him listening, and we're happy to bring the show. I think I can speak for you in that as well, Don. Jermaine Jackson, before we get to our call, I do want to address this. Don, have you ever seen a game stopped by protesters who are on the field with no signs of security anywhere inside? Have you ever seen anything like that?
Well, my wife had some sorority sisters that were at the game, and they commented that they didn't even get checked when went into the game. Their tickets were never checked. So Northwestern probably needs to work on their security a little bit, I do believe.
Well, and I just love how the camera show. First of all, the protesters weren't the smartest because they were facing the wrong way. They had signs pointed the opposite direction of the TV cameras, Don.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that.
Were those Northwestern grads, or were they maybe those that failed out of school, maybe?
I was going to say, that does not help the reputation of what usually is a very prestigious Northwestern University. Okay, let's get to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hello?
Yep. Can you hear us, caller?
Yeah, sure can. Hey, this is Josh from Oklahoma. I had a few quick questions for you.
Okay.
The first, I guess we're looking at Georgia as being this great defensive team, and I believe they are. Where do you see the holes in this team, and who can punch through those holes? Who can really give this team a test, do you believe?
We're talking about Georgia. Don, you probably know more about Georgia than I do.
I can honestly say I've hardly seen any Georgia games this year. Just worked out that way. I know they were on today, but I didn't watch. And who are they playing today? I can't recall. It was one-sided. I know that.
Missouri.
Yeah.
Yeah, Missouri.
The 4-4 Missouri team. I don't doubt that they're very, very stout on defense. And, of course, they have a good ball control offense. They do have a quarterback that can throw. And they're tested. They play a lot of good, solid teams in the SEC. So I give them credit for being an outstanding program. I think they're going to be hard to beat, hard for anyone to beat. Frankly, the best thing that could happen.
They played. It seems they haven't played a really high-powered offense from anybody yet. They played some really good teams, but have they faced a really good offense?
Well, they're gonna get Alabama, right? I mean, they're going to be tested against Alabama. Now, that may not be enough to keep them out of the playoff, but if you lose to Bama in the championship game, there's your high-powered offense, but you may end up getting 2 SEC teams into the playoff if that happens.
And I know, and it may take that too. I guess my question is, where is this weakness in this defense? I mean, there's that great, like you were mentioning, there's always every year there's these great teams that do this and that, either on offense or defense. But
my guess is the team that would have the best chance against Georgia would be a team that can throw the ball well. The one team that comes to mind for me in the SEC would be Ole Miss. I don't even know if Ole Miss plays Georgia in the regular season, but I think Ole Miss would give them a test because Ole Miss has one of the best quarterbacks in college football.
And it's going to take somebody with a dynamic quarterback play to, I think.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be able to run the ball up and down the field against Georgia. I think the best way to beat them would be through the air.
I agree. Okay. And one more really quick question here. And it pertains to Oklahoma OU, where I'm at.
Okay.
What do you think about the Big 12 has all these coaching, firings and whatever going on right now. And I know that Grinch, the defensive coach here at Oklahoma, interviewed at Texas Tech. Do you think that's a good move for him?
Well, some defensive coordinators do not make good head coaches. And I don't honestly know which category he would fall into. Would he be one that is destined to be a head coach? I'll give you a prime example would be Bobby Stoops. Bobby Stoops is a really good head coach, and I'm confident that even when he was a coordinator, people identified him as a really good candidate to be an outstanding head coach. I
think people have those qualities. They have those qualities where they may not. They're a great coordinator, but then they may have more of that head coach mindset. And like I said, with Bob Stoops, prime example, he was a really good coordinator, but there's something about him that made you think that he would be he had what it took to be that head man in charge.
Right. I just don't know that much about.
I don't know if Grinch. I don't know about Grinch. To know if he has that.
Yeah, I don't know about him to really make any kind of educated comment. I'd say this in general. I'm a little nervous. If I was an AD, I'd be a little bit nervous about hiring defensive coordinators as a head coach, simply because that means they better be sure to hire a great offensive coordinator to be able to call plays. The best head coaches in my mind are former offensive coaches, and clearly guys like Bobby Stoops are
where we're at. Is that it? Like you comment on where we're at in the game right now? Is that an offensive coordinator would make a better head coach? Right now, just because the state of the game is, that's what you need to do is be able to get that, be able to move the ball down there more than even if the defense is a little bit shaky, if you have a good offense, you're going to be able to win the game.
Well, let me just add this, caller. And of course, we're talking Iowa on our show, but I do want to say this. Iowa is in the opposite situation because I think most of the fans, at least myself, would much rather elevate Iowa's defensive coordinator to head coach as opposed to Iowa's offensive coordinator. But I understand Don's position on the subject, but that would be all I have to offer on the conversation.
Oh, and I completely agree with that. I mean, I think Iowa would, pray for any offense at this point. So, but yeah, I was just kind of wondering. I mean, the coaching changes that are going right now are ridiculous. I mean, here in the middle of the season, and they're really hurting teams. And I just, and especially when in these other teams that have them coaching interviewers for these other teams, it's just kind of creating this big mixed up jumble right here in the middle of the season when the most important games are being played. And so that kind of frustrates me.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, caller.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Appreciate the call. All right. Let's get to our next caller here. Hopefully. Maybe. Oh, and he just dropped off. This question from Robert: if the coach received a penalty for putting his face in his cap, how many penalties did Hayden Fry receive for smashing his headset, Don?
Well, the truth of it is, Coach Fry didn't wear a headset very much. If you go back and look at old video, Coach Fry was the kind of head coach that typically did not wear a headset. There was a guy on the bench that was always in communication with me or with Bill Snyder when Bill was the offensive coordinator. And that poor guy was the go-between, and his job was difficult because there were times when he would be just desperately scribbling out a play call on a 3x5 card and handing it to Coach Fry. And that's a hard job because you couldn't, it was a hard job for us as coordinators because you couldn't talk directly to Coach Fry when you really needed to at different times. But that's just the way Coach Fry was. He didn't want to be confused with somebody talking into his ear all the time. And he would certainly take recommendations from you, but he also had a real knack for calling a good game on his own. And I think when he was at his very best, he would make a lot of great calls on his own, and he would listen to us, whether it was Bill Snyder or myself, listen to us with our recommendations and put those recommendations on the field at all the right times.
Absolutely. And I do apologize. We had a couple callers that had to drop off because Mark needs the main caller line for his show, which has been on delay because of our show. So I apologize to Mark for the delay. Apologize to our caller, or our callers, I should say. And we are wanting to wrap this thing up, Don, because I know we're pushing midnight for you. Let me just see if there's anything else here in the chat that we're missing. Appreciate the compliment from Ray Owens. Always appreciate the listen. Cyclone Steve says, didn't hear the score. Did IU win? Good question. Anybody know? Let me look up the score here. Indiana did not win. No, it's Michigan won 29-7. So it was close early, but boy, Michigan pulled away. And boy, what a performance by Iowa State, Don.
I was going to say, I understand the Cyclones had a good night.
Yeah, let me give you the score there. Had it earlier. I know they were up big, 30-7. 30-7 right here in Ames. Boy, Cyclones coming on at the right time. They've got a chance at the Big 12 still.
Does that mean Steve Sarkisian is not necessarily the savior for Texas football, you think? Is that 4 in a row, maybe?
I'd have to look back, but I tell you, Texas football has not been – they have not been – I mean, it's not worked. It didn't work with Charlie Strong, and now you could argue that it's certainly not working with Sarkisian. Cyclone Steve says he was watching a Texas show, and this show came up as a recommendation. So that means we're doing good in the algorithm on YouTube, so we appreciate that. And even though you're a Cyclone fan, Steve, we appreciate you listening. Christopher brings up poor tackling. We did address that earlier. But, yeah, there were moments where the tackling was not good. But, again, that's not a point of contention or a point of concern for me, at least moving forward. our Buckeye fan, says congrats to Iowa for the win. And let's see here. John, I like this comment from John. He assumes James Franklin sent the protest to disrupt our momentum. I love that, Don. Any thoughts? I know you're not a James Franklin fan.
Well played. That makes complete sense.
Charles reminds everybody that this is, of course, Don, the GOAT, Don Patterson, the GOAT, who's with us again.
Charles, you're very good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. And apparently we're Batman and Robin, and I'm Robin. So you know what? I'm proud to take the role of Robin, Don, with you as Batman. And certainly Iowa has got, you can maybe argue, a Batman and Robin quarterback situation to figure out, although we might be selling those two quarterbacks way too high at this point. I like this comment as well. Coach Don is Texas football. So you do understand Longhorn football, don't you, Don? You spent a lot of time in Texas.
That's the uniform I always wanted to wear, but I wasn't good enough. And University of Texas was a great program back in the 60s and 70s. I graduated from high school in 69. And as you know, one of my all-time favorite wins was a bowl win over the University of Texas in 1984. And don't let any Texas fan tell you that we ran the score up, because we had 55 points after 3 quarters of play. The final was 55-17.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there. A few housekeeping matters to get to before we sign off for the evening. From the Hawkeye of the Storm, our podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Google, Anchor, wherever you listen to podcasts. We will also have this postgame, as well as every postgame we've done with Coach Don Patterson, available as an on-demand podcast. Again, From the Hawkeye of the Storm. From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Search that. Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can listen to this postgame or any of our postgames back on audio. And of course, if you haven't already followed us from the Hawkeye of the Storm, do so, please. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. And of course, we here are Iowa at the Voice of College Football. Also, you'll see in the bottom ticker, the Voice of College Football on YouTube. Mark Rogers does a tremendous job coverage across the country. So be sure to tune. I know he's live right now over at his channel. So if you love college football and you haven't already subscribed, do that, please. Also, Iowa Live each Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. right here on this channel, Iowa football at the Voice of College Football. So join us Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. Central Time, Iowa football at the Voice of College Football. If you enjoy the content, which I hope that everyone does, we've still got over 120 listeners at current. Please donate. Help the channel out. You can certainly check the description and follow one of the links below, and make a note, please, that it's for the Iowa channel. If you don't make a note it's for the Iowa channel, it does not help the Iowa channel. So again, please do that. And if you didn't hear our announcement last night over at my channel, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, we will be doing live Iowa basketball post games. This is Iowa men's basketball, of course. Iowa basketball post games with Coach Gary Close. And Don, since we have you here, you knew Gary. Gary was an assistant coach with Coach Dr. Tom Davis while he was at Iowa. And you and Gary, I know, became good friends. Maybe give a bit of a vote of confidence for Gary and what you know about Gary and his ability to break it all down for us on the post-game show for Iowa basketball.
Well, he certainly had he and Dr. Tom had a really good run at Iowa. And as most of our listeners know, Gary also was a valued assistant coach at Wisconsin in the latter stages of his career. So he's had success not with one Big Ten program, but with at least 2. I think that's all, just 2. I'm not sure that he coached with more than those 2 teams in the Big Ten. But I think, as I recall, Gary's responsibility was the big men, and we always had good big men. And I believe he had that same responsibility at Wisconsin too. So he certainly had a wonderful career, and I'm happy for him that he was able to. I think he finished his career on his terms. He got to coach a long time. That's the best way to prove that you have had a good careers that you get to coach as long as you'd like to coach. And I think Gary coached into his 60s. I don't know how old Gary is right now, but he certainly had a nice career with the Badgers and with Iowa. And I'm happy to have known him as well as I did. He's a good man.
And again, he will be with us after the majority. I can't guarantee every game. Of course, he's got obligations, he's got a family. He's actually got a son who's a team manager for Fran and this team this year. So he'll be down in Iowa City a lot, but he'll be jumping on our postgame show. So if you want to watch our Iowa basketball postgame show, subscribe to From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. You can also watch our postgame, just myself, last night. But starting this coming Tuesday, regular season hoops, Iowa versus Longwood. We'll have Gary with us late night after that game. All right, next week, it's Iowa, Minnesota. Time is currently TBA. I do not have an update on that. Let me check here, Don. No, I have not gotten anything. So we'll see on next week. I've heard Scott Docterman of The Athletic reported earlier in the week that it will not be a night game, which is fine with me. I don't like the morning games, but maybe it will be. Of course, it'll be in Iowa City. So we'll be with you whenever that game ends, 15 minutes after the game or so. We'll be with you right here at Iowa Postgame with the Voice of College Football. So final recap of today. Alex Padilla comes in for Spencer Petras late in the first quarter, throws for 18 of 28 for 172 yards. Petras was in there for just under a quarter of play, was 2 of 4 for 4 yards, certainly struggled. I will say a couple interesting stats here, Don, that just show how close this game was. 19 first downs for Iowa's offense, 20 for Northwestern. You look at total yardage, Iowa, of course, won the ground game, and Northwestern would have forced to throw more because of where they were on the scoreboard, but total yardage, Iowa 361, Northwestern 363. And so that, of course, brings up the question, will it be Alex Padilla or will it be Spencer Petras starting next week, Don? Anything to add? I know we didn't talk about Tyler Goodson a lot tonight, had 141 yards rushing, 35 receiving yards. Keegan Johnson also had a solid game, especially in that first half, 5 catches, 86 yards. And, of course, our star on defense had to be Dane Belton, 2 picks in the game tonight. But Don, anything else, Don, that we missed?
I can't think of anything.
All right. Well, Don, it's been a pleasure as always. We certainly appreciate you joining us this evening and for hanging out for over an hour and a half. You've given us more time than you've ever promised, and so we appreciate it, and I hope I know our fans feel the same way.
Always a pleasure, Cory, and we look forward to the Gophers.
All right, for Don Patterson, Coach Don Patterson, I'm Cory Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm in Iowa at the Voice of College Football. We will talk to you soon. Go Hawks.